It was
Let's break it
supposed to
down.
be impossible.
Recent activity in
A
Ulyanovsk
machine
is
so
sending a
large,
signal that
so
should not be
demanding, and so
underestimated.
expensive that most countries wouldn't even dare to imagine it. Yet suddenly, whispers are growing louder about a new giant rising into the skies. A transport aircraft designed to carry more weight than almost anything flying today. Bigger than the AN-124, closer than anyone has come to replacing the legendary Antonov An-225. Some are already calling it the AL-100, and, according to unverified reports, Russia and India may be inching toward a deal that could turn this idea into reality. But what exactly is the IL-100? Why does it matter right now? And is this project a genuine breakthrough or just another bold promise? The story really begins with a shadow that still looms over global aviation. When the AN-225 was destroyed, the world didn't just lose an aircraft, it lost a capability, a one-of-a-kind platform that could move massive industrial equipment, military hardware, and emergency cargo that no other plane could handle. Since then, no country has truly filled that gap. The AN-124 remains the largest operational transport aircraft, but even it is living on borrowed time. And that's where the idea of the IL-100 starts to feel less like ambition and more like desperation. For Russia, this problem has been building quietly for years. Much of its strategic airlift fleet still relies on Soviet-era designs, many of them tied to Ukrainian engineering and supply chains. In the past, that wasn't an issue. Today, it's a structural weakness. Access to technical documentation, spare parts, and long-term maintenance support has become increasingly limited. Restarting production of older platforms is effectively off the table. And as global tensions rise, the ability to move troops, vehicles, and oversized equipment quickly across vast distances has shifted from convenience to necessity. That urgency is exactly why recent activity in Ulyanovsk has drawn so much attention. In early December 2025, regional officials confirmed that Aviastar SP-1 of Russia's most important aircraft production facilities would receive roughly 48 billion rubles for large-scale modernization. On paper, it looked like a routine industrial upgrade, but beneath the surface, the purpose was far more revealing. The facility is being prepared for serial production of two new military transport aircraft programs, the IL-100 and the IL-276. The timing was anything but random. The announcement came shortly after high-level discussions involving Vladimir Putin, effectively elevating both aircraft into the strategic priority category. This wasn't about preserving what already exists. It was about rebuilding the backbone of Russia's military airlift capability from scratch. The IL-276 would address the medium-lift gap, replacing aging workhorses like the AN-12 and AN-26. But the IL-100 was aimed at something far bigger, a super-heavy transport aircraft capable of carrying between 150 and 180 tons, potentially surpassing the AN-124 in payload and range. If successful, it would become the cornerstone of Russia's strategic air mobility for decades. But here's where history starts flashing warning signs. Aircraft programs don't fail because of airframes. They fail because of engines. And for years, that's exactly where Russia kept hitting a wall. The IL-100 depends on ultra-high engines derived from the PD-35 family, a program long plagued by delays, complexity, and shifting priorities. Until recently, that bottleneck made any serious talk of a super-heavy transport little more than speculation. Now, with incremental progress reported in the PD-35 program, the conversation has changed, not because the engine is ready, but because, for the first time, it doesn't look completely out of reach. Still, engineering is only half the battle. The AN-124 didn't stumble because it couldn't fly. It stumbled because it was too expensive to sustain without enough buyers. That same economic trap now threatens the IL-100, no matter how urgent the need. Russia's Ministry of Defense can't fund a program of this scale alone. Serial production requires volume, and volume requires partners, which brings a familiar name back into the picture. India has played this role before. For decades, New Delhi has acted as a critical external customer for Russian aerospace and defense programs, helping them reach viable production numbers. Today, India faces its own airlift dilemma. Its IL-76 and IL-78 fleets are aging rapidly, while strategic mobility has become more important than ever. At the same time, India is pushing hard to expand domestic manufacturing under its Make in India initiative. On paper, the alignment looks almost too perfect. That's why the timing of diplomatic events in late 2025 raised eyebrows across defense circles. On December 4th and 5th, President Putin visited New Delhi for the annual Russia-India summit with Narendra Modi. Publicly, the agenda focused on energy, cooperation, trade, and ongoing defense programs. Agreements were signed on long-term economic cooperation, military logistics support, and joint production of civilian aircraft like the Superjet. But what caught analysts' attention wasn't what was announced, was what wasn't. Just days after the summit, Russia unveiled its major retooling plan for Aviastar SP, given the plant's role in future transport aircraft production. The coincidence felt deliberate. Earlier reports had already hinted that Moscow was exploring Indian participation in the IL-100 program. Nothing was confirmed, but rumors suggest discussions may have ranged from joint development to localized production or future procurement commitments. Framed carefully, this remains speculation. But it's speculation grounded in mutual need. At the medium-lift level, Russia is also quietly positioning the IL-276 as a contender for India's upcoming transport aircraft competition, expected to formally launch in 2026. Proposals reportedly include deep industrial cooperation with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited and generous offsets. If pursued, these projects could become the next major pillars of Indo-Russian aerospace collaboration. And yet, reality refuses to be ignored. As of late 2025, neither the IL-100 nor the IL-276 has a flying prototype. The IL-100 exists only as concept studies and digital renderings. The IL-276, despite being discussed for more than 2 decades, has missed multiple deadlines without explanation. Engines remain a critical vulnerability, with PD-35 class power plants unlikely to be operational before the early 2030s. Add Western sanctions, supply chain disruptions, and an already overstretched aerospace sector, and the challenges multiply fast. Even programs further along paint a sobering picture. Production of the modernized IL-76 at Aviastar SP has consistently fallen short of targets. Civilian projects like the MC-21 have faced repeated delays in performance, compromises due to domestic substitutions. If these aircraft struggle to reach scale, the path for entirely new and more complex transports looks even steeper. So where does that leave the IL-100? Somewhere between vision and uncertainty. The alignment of political intent, industrial investment, and potential international partnership is real. But so are the obstacles. Engines, economics, sanctions, and production capacity don't bend easily to ambition. Whether cooperation with India can meaningfully accelerate development remains an open question. What's clear is this: the race to rebuild strategic airlift capability has entered a new phase. And whether the IL-100 becomes the next giant of the skies or another symbol of unrealized potential will depend on far more than announcements. The gap between concept and capability is still wide, and closing it may take a decade, not a few headlines. And that gap is where the real tension sits. On one side, there's undeniable momentum. Political backing at the highest level. Billions allocated for factory modernization. Long-stalled concepts being pulled back into the spotlight, and a potential international partner with both the need and the money to make large-scale production possible. These aren't small signals. In aerospace, they're often the first steps toward something tangible. On the other side, there's a long list of hard limits that can't be ignored. Aircraft programs don't move on speeches or summits. They move on test rigs, supply chains, and flight hours. Right now, the IL-100 doesn't have metal on the floor. It doesn't have a certified engine. It doesn't have a locked production schedule. And without those, every projection remains theoretical, no matter how compelling the concept looks on paper. The engine question alone could define the fate of the entire program. Even optimistic assessments place full maturity of PD-35 class power plants well into the next decade. Until that happens, timelines will remain fluid, and commitments will stay cautious. Any serious partner, India included, would likely demand concrete progress before tying itself to a project of this scale. No one wants to bankroll another aircraft that never leaves the prototype stage. Sanctions add another invisible layer of friction. Every missing component forces a redesign. Every substituted system adds weight, complexity, or inefficiency. These compromises stack up quietly, often revealing themselves only during late-stage testing. It's a problem Russia has already encountered on multiple aviation programs, and there's little reason to believe the Il-1 would be immune. Still, dismissing the project outright would be a mistake. Strategic airlift is becoming more valuable, not less. Conflicts are larger, supply lines are longer, and the ability to move heavy equipment quickly can shape outcomes before ground forces ever engage. Both Russia and India understand this, and both know that relying indefinitely on aging fleets is not a viable long-term solution. That's what makes this moment so interesting. The Il-1 isn't just an aircraft concept. It's a stress test, a test of whether ambition can overcome industrial strain, a test of whether partnerships can compensate for limited resources, and a test of whether modern geopolitical pressure can actually accelerate rather than stall aerospace development. If cooperation deepens, the program could evolve slowly but steadily, moving from digital models to prototypes, from prototypes to limited production. If it doesn't, the Il-1 may remain what it is today, a powerful idea hovering just out of reach. The same is true for the Il-276, which sits at a crossroads between renewed relevance and another cycle of delays. So for now, the world waits, watching factory upgrades, tracking engine milestones, reading between the lines of diplomatic meetings, because somewhere between rumor and reality, a decision is being shaped, one that will determine whether the next true giant of the skies is already on the drawing board, whether the age of super-heavy airlifters quietly fades into history. What do you think? Is this the beginning of a new era in strategic airlift, or another reminder that some legends are easier to admire than to replace? Zooming out even further, there's another layer to this story that rarely gets discussed, but quietly shapes everything behind the scenes. Global demand for extreme airlift itself. Super-heavy transport aircraft aren't built just because engineers want to push limits. They exist because no other tool can solve certain problems. Moving ballistic missile launchers, relocating damaged armor from remote theaters, delivering power generators, bridge sections, or emergency infrastructure to places with no ports and limited roads. These missions don't happen every day, but when they do, nothing else can replace a super-heavy airlifter. That's why the AN-225 became more than an aircraft. It became a strategic asset that governments, corporations, and humanitarian agencies all relied on when the impossible needed to happen fast. Its loss didn't just hurt Ukraine or aviation enthusiasts. It exposed how fragile that capability really was. Suddenly, the world realized there was no backup plan, no reserve fleet, no replacement waiting in the wings. This realization has quietly changed how military planners think. Strategic airlift is no longer just about numbers of aircraft, but about maximum capability per sortie. In a world where access to airspace can be contested and logistics chains disrupted, fewer flights carrying more cargo can be more valuable than larger fleets of smaller planes. That logic plays directly into the Il-100's proposed role. For Russia, this logic is amplified by geography. Vast distances, harsh climates, limited infrastructure, and multiple potential theaters of operation all favor aircraft that can do more in a single flight. The Il-1 isn't just about prestige or symbolism. It's about efficiency under pressure. The ability to respond quickly without relying on foreign transport services or aging platforms with uncertain readiness. India's interest, if it materializes, would stem from a different but equally compelling reality. While India doesn't face the same geographic extremes, it does face logistical complexity. Mountainous borders, island territories, disaster-prone regions, and growing expeditionary responsibilities all strain existing airlift assets. Heavy transport aircraft are not just military tools, they are lifelines during earthquakes, floods, and humanitarian crises. This is why analysts believe any potential cooperation wouldn't be limited to simple procurement. If India commits, it would likely push for shared production, localized assembly, and technology transfer. Not just to build aircraft, but to build capability. That kind of arrangement could fundamentally reshape how the IL-100 program evolves, turning it from a national project into a joint strategic platform. But joint programs bring their own risks, differing requirements, political shifts, budget pressures, and industrial disagreements have derailed ambitious partnerships before. The failed multi-role transport aircraft project between Russia and India still lingers as a cautionary tale. Both sides remember how quickly optimism can collapse when timelines slip and costs rise. That memory may explain why everything around the IL-100 feels deliberately quiet. No flashy mock-ups at air shows. No bold promises of first flights within a few years. Instead, small, carefully calibrated steps. Factory upgrades framed as modernization. Engine progress discussed in technical terms rather than deadlines. Diplomatic language that leaves room to move forward, pull back. This caution suggests that decision-makers understand what's at stake. If the IL-100 is announced too early and fails, it becomes another symbol of overreach. But if it emerges slowly, almost reluctantly, it has a better chance of surviving the long road from concept to runway. And that road is long. Even in the best-case scenario, years of structural testing, flight trials, certification hurdles, and production tuning lie ahead. Every ton of payload adds stress to the airframe. Every kilometer of range complicates fuel and engine efficiency. Every system must work, not just once, but reliably, in harsh conditions, for decades. This is why skepticism remains high. Not because the idea lacks merit, but because the margin for error is razor thin. One failed engine milestone, one supply chain disruption to many, one budget reallocation. Any of these could quietly freeze the program without an official cancellation. Yet history also shows that aerospace breakthroughs often come from moments like this. Moments when necessity overrides hesitation. When multiple pressures align just enough to force action. The IL-100 exists precisely at that intersection. It is being pulled forward by need, even as reality pushes back just as hard. For viewers watching this unfold from the outside, patience is key. This isn't a story that resolves with a rollout ceremony or a single headline. It's a slow burn. One that will reveal its outcome through patterns, not announcements. Through what gets funded year after year, through which facilities expand and which quietly stagnate. Through whether engine programs accelerate or stall again. So when people ask whether the IL-100 is real, the honest answer is complicated. It's real as an intention. Real as a response to a strategic problem. Real as a design direction. But it is not yet real as an aircraft. That distinction matters more than any rendering or rumor. And until that changes, the IL-100 will continue to occupy a unique space in modern aviation discourse. Not a myth, not a machine, but a test of how far ambition can go in a world where building giants has never been harder or more necessary. The sky is waiting. The question is whether anyone can afford to fill it with something this big. There's also a quieter consequence unfolding alongside all of this, one that goes beyond aircraft models and production timelines. The IL-100 debate reflects a deeper shift in how power, logistics, and industrial strength are measured in the modern era. For decades, air superiority grabbed headlines, while transport aviation stayed in the background. But recent conflicts have flipped that script. The ability to move forces has become just as decisive as the ability to fight. In that sense, the IL-100 isn't competing with fighters or bombers for attention. It's competing with time. Every hour saved moving heavy equipment can change outcomes on the ground. Every mission completed in one sortie instead of 3 reduces exposure, cost, and risk. This is the logic driving renewed interest in extreme airlift, even as budgets tighten and engineering